The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wide like an ocean of stars. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the floating seats that hung in the air like glowing bubbles. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in the small section marked for new species. Her simple blue uniform looked plain, next to the shining armor and flowing robes of the older races. The air buzzed with angry voices, speaking in hundreds of languages. Elena's translator earpiece worked hard to keep up with all the different words. She watched as two groups of aliens faced each other across the great hall like armies ready to fight. On one side sat the crystalline hegemony. Their bodies looked like living glass that caught and threw back the light in rainbow colors. Elder Zixthara stood tall among them, her crystal form singing out words that made the air itself vibrate. The sound was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. On the other side, the Void Syndicate gathered like shadows made real. Their dark forms seemed to eat the light around them. When they spoke, their words came out like whispers that could freeze blood. They wanted the same thing as the Crystal People, mining rights in the Andromeda. Spiral. Elena had read the reports on her way to the council meeting. Both groups claimed the same star systems. Both said they found the systems first. Both had proof that the other side was lying. Now, they wanted war. The Void Syndicate has stolen what belongs to us for the last time, Elder Zixthara sang out. Her voice made the walls ring like a giant bell. We have mined those systems for 10,000 of your Earth years. We will not let shadow thieves take what is ours. A Void Syndicate leader flowed forward like smoke taking shape. The Crystal Singers lie as always. Our people were there first. We have the star maps to prove it. The Gemini wants to steal our work and call it their own. Arguments flew back and forth like weapons. Elena listened and took notes on her simple paper pad. The other ambassadors used floating light screens and thought writers, but Elena liked the feel of pen on paper. It helped her think. The debate went on for hours. Elena learned that both sides had been fighting over mining rights for hundreds of years. The Andromeda Spiral held rare metals that could power starships for centuries. Whoever controlled it would become the richest power in the galaxy. As the arguments grew louder, Elena stood up from her seat. The small movement caught the attention of some nearby ambassadors. A few of them looked at her with curious eyes. Most ignored her completely. Elena cleared her throat and spoke into her microphone. The representative from Terra requests permission to speak. The great hall grew quiet for a moment. Then laughter started from different sections. Not mean laughter, but the kind people make when they see something cute and harmless. Elder Zixthara's crystal form turned toward Elena. The light patterns under her skin shifted to show amusement. The infant species wishes to speak. How adorable. Very well, young one. Share your thoughts with the adults. Elena felt her face grow warm, but she kept her voice steady. Terra offers to help mediate this dispute. We have experience in peaceful conflict resolution. We could help both sides find a solution that works for everyone. The laughter grew louder. A tall being covered in blue fur spoke from the ancient species section. Mediate? You have had space travel for what, 200 years? We have been building empires since before your son was born. Your people are still learning to walk between the stars, added another voice. You send out colony ships like children playing with toy boats. How could you possibly understand the complexities of galactic politics? Elder Zixthara's voice rang out over the noise. Child species of Terra, your offer is sweet, but this matter involves forces and principles that your young minds cannot grasp. The crystalline hegemony and the Void Syndicate represent powers that have shaped this galaxy for millions of years. This is not a dispute between neighbors over property lines. This is about the very balance of galactic civilization. Elena tried to speak again, but the elder continued. Your species has barely left its home system. You know nothing of the true nature of interstellar politics. The mining rights we discuss could power fleets that could destroy entire star systems. The technology involved requires understanding of space-time mechanics that your scientists are only beginning to discover. The Void Syndicate leader added his voice to the dismissal. The young species should return to their small corner of space and focus on learning. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when they have grown wise enough to understand the weight of true power, they may join such discussions. A vote was called. Elena watched as the results appeared on the great screens around the hall. 847 votes to exclude Terra from all war-related discussions. Only 3 votes supported including humanity. Elena's heart sank as she realized even some of the younger species had voted against Terra. Elder Zixtara stood once more, her crystal form gleaming. It is decided. The species Terra will maintain strict neutrality in this conflict. You will not interfere in any way. Focus on your colony ships and your small explorations. This war will reshape sectors of space that you cannot even pronounce the names of. She paused and looked directly at Elena. Leave Terra out of this war, child species. This is beyond you. Return to your home and play with your little ships. Let the true powers of the galaxy handle matters of real importance. The session ended with formal declarations of war. Both the Crystalline Hegemony and the Void Syndicate began making threats that made the air itself seem heavy with coming violence. Elena gathered her simple paper notes and walked toward the exit door as she left the Great Hall. Elena heard other ambassadors talking in small groups. They spoke of fleets that could crack planets and weapons that could make stars burn out. They talked about strategies that spanned centuries and battles that would be fought. Across light years of space, Elena thought about her home. She thought about Admiral Sarah Chun waiting for her report. She thought about the billions of innocent people who lived in the systems that would soon become battlefields. The Galactic Council had made their choice clear. Terra would stay out of this war. But as Elena walked to her small ship, she wondered if Terra would really be able to watch from the sidelines while worlds burned and people died. The galaxy's elders thought they knew what humans would do. Elena suspected they were about to learn something new about the young species from a small blue world. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching the reports come in from across the galaxy. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform showed the wear of someone who spent more time working than polishing buttons. The screens around her showed star maps painted with red zones where the war was spreading. Elena had returned from the Galactic Council 3 days ago. Her report was clear. Humanity was to stay out of the conflict completely. The great powers wanted Terra to sit quietly while they fought their ancient war. Admiral, Captain Rex Morrison said as he entered the command center. His medical uniform was crisp and clean, but his eyes showed the tiredness of someone who had been working without sleep. The latest intelligence reports are in. The war is expanding faster than anyone predicted. Sarah looked at the new data flowing across her screens. The Crystalline Hegemony had deployed their reality-bending dreadnoughts, ships the size of small moons that could fold space around themselves. The Void Syndicate had answered with dark matter cruisers that could slip between dimensions like ghosts. "Show me the civilian populations," Sarah said quietly. The star map changed. Now it showed not just military positions, but the locations of planets full of ordinary people. Farming worlds, mining colonies, research stations, and trade hubs. Billions of beings who had nothing to do with the war, but would be caught in its path. "Captain," Morrison pointed to a cluster of worlds near the fighting. "These 17 systems are directly in the war zone. Early projections show they'll be overrun within the next few weeks. That's 4.2 billion civilians from 43 different species." Sarah studied the map for a long time. The great powers were moving their ancient war machines into position like pieces on a chessboard. Weapons that had dominated space warfare for thousands of years. Energy cannons that could melt asteroids. Shield systems that could protect entire fleets. Battle tactics perfected over millions of years of fighting. What about evacuation plans? Sarah asked. There are none, Captain Morrison replied. Both sides consider civilian casualties to be acceptable losses. The Galactic Council voted to create refugee camps on distant worlds, but only after the war ends. Sarah felt a familiar anger building in her chest. It was the same feeling she had during the Mars colony crisis 20 years ago, when the corporate board wanted to abandon 3,000 settlers because saving them was too expensive. She had disobeyed direct orders then to save those people. Now she was looking at billions of lives. Admiral, Elena's voice came from behind her. The ambassador had entered the command center quietly. I know what you're thinking, but the council was very clear. We cannot interfere. The council told us to stay out of their war, Sarah said slowly. They didn't say we couldn't help people. Elena raised an eyebrow. What's the difference? Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Project Shepherd. Within hours, Sarah had called together her senior staff. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Terra would deploy medical and rescue vessels to the war zone. Not to fight, but to evacuate civilians and provide aid to anyone who needed it. The aliens use giant warships because that's how they've always fought, Sarah explained to her officers. Big, powerful, slow. We're going to use what we're good at. Small, fast, adaptable. Captain Morrison would lead the medical ships. His vessel, the Florence Nightingale, was typical of Terra's approach. It looked nothing like the sleek warships other species built. Instead, it was a collection of connected modules that could be rearranged based on need. Medical bays, cargo holds, passenger compartments, all connected by flexible corridors that could stretch and bend. The aliens think our ships look like flying scrapyards. Captain Morrison laughed during the briefing. Let them think that. Terra's ships were built on different principles than the rest of the galaxy. While other species created vessels designed for specific purposes, humans built ships that could change and adapt. The same technology that had helped them navigate Earth's chaotic weather patterns and ocean storms. The first rescue mission began quietly. Captain Morrison took his ship to a farming world called Zephyr Prime. The planet was home to 30,000 butterfly-like aliens who grew food for 3 different star systems. The crystalline hegemony had declared the world a strategic resource and planned to occupy it. Within days, Morrison's ship slipped past the hegemony patrol ships without being noticed. Human vessels used navigation systems that the aliens couldn't understand. Instead of following fixed star routes, they calculated paths through space using mathematical patterns that looked like chaos to outside observers. The evacuation began at dawn. Morrison's crew worked with calm efficiency, loading families of Zephyrian refugees onto transport modules. The butterfly people were confused but grateful. Most had never seen humans before. Why are you helping us? Asked one of the Zephyrian elders as Morrison helped her onto the ship. Her wings were silver with age, and her voice was like music played on crystal chimes. Because you need help, Morrison replied simply. The evacuation was almost complete when the crystalline hegemony patrol ships found them. 3 crystal dreadnoughts materialized out of folded space, their reality-bending drives creating ripples in space-time itself. Elder Vixmora, commander of the lead ship, opened communications. Her crystalline voice sang out with authority and annoyance. Terran vessel, you are in violation of Galactic Council directives. You will cease this operation immediately and withdraw from hegemony space. Morrison stood on his bridge, looking at the massive ships on his screen. Each one was 50 times the size of his medical frigate. Their weapons could turn his ship into vapor in seconds. Elder Vix Mora. This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Medical Corps. We are conducting humanitarian evacuation of civilian populations. We are not involved in military operations. You are interfering with hegemony territorial claims. The civilian population is now under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. Medical technicians, rescue specialists, engineers. None of them were soldiers, but all of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. Elder, we have 30,000 civilians on board who will die if caught in the fighting. Give us 2 hours to complete the evacuation, and we'll withdraw. You have 5 minutes. Morrison nodded to his engineering officer. Time to show them what human ships can do. The next few minutes changed how the galaxy viewed human technology forever. The crystalline ships fired their reality-warping weapons, beams of energy that could fold space and crush matter. But the attacks seemed to slide past Morrison's ship like water off a duck's back. Human ships didn't use the fixed shielding systems that other species relied on. Instead, they used adaptive defensive fields that could shift and change in real time. Technology developed from studying how Earth's magnetic field protected the planet from solar storms. How are they doing that? Elder Vix Mora demanded over the communications channel. Morrison's ship continued loading refugees while dodging attacks that should have destroyed it instantly. The human vessel moved in patterns that the alien targeting computers couldn't predict. Instead of flying in straight lines or calculated curves, it moved like a living thing, responding to threats with intuitive course changes. We navigate by reading the storm, Morrison replied calmly. You can't hit what you can't predict. The evacuation finished just as the Void Syndicate ships arrived. Dark cruisers emerged from dimensional rifts, ready to battle the crystalline forces. Morrison's ship slipped away in the confusion, carrying 30,000 grateful refugees to safety. Within hours, word spread across the galaxy's communication networks. The infant species had somehow survived attacks from reality-warping weapons. Their crude-looking ships had rescued civilians from directly under the nose of one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. In the Galactic Council chambers, Elder Zixthara listened to the reports with growing confusion. How did the humans do this? Their technology should be centuries behind ours. But across the war zone, more human ships were already moving. While the great powers prepared their ancient strategies and powerful weapons, Terra was playing by completely different rules. They weren't trying to win the war. They were trying to save everyone caught in the middle of it. And somehow, the child species with their strange ships and simple goals were accomplishing things that the galaxy's greatest civilizations couldn't understand. The war spread like fire through dry grass. What had started as a dispute over mining rights now consumed entire sectors of space. Both the crystalline hegemony and the Void Syndicate had called in their allies. And ancient treaties pulled more species into the conflict. Admiral Chun watched the tactical displays from her command ship, the Terra Nova. She had moved her headquarters into the war zone itself, against the direct orders of the Galactic Council. Around her, a dozen human medical frigates linked together to form a mobile field hospital that could separate and reconnect as needed. Status report. She called out to her officers. Captain. Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he looked up from his coordination station. We've evacuated 400,000 civilians in the past week, but the fighting is getting worse. Both sides are using weapons we've never seen before. On the main screen, they watched as a crystalline hegemony battleship fired its reality-warping drive as a weapon. The beam didn't just destroy the Void Syndicate target. It folded the space around it into impossible shapes. Where the enemy ship had been, now there was just a twisted knot of space-time that hurt to look at. The void Syndicate answered with dark matter torpedoes that consumed everything they touched. Entire asteroid belts vanished into nothingness, leaving behind empty space that felt wrong somehow. Even the stars seemed dimmer after the dark weapons passed. Admiral, Communications Officer Lisa Park called out. "We're getting a priority transmission from the Mentarch observation fleet." The screen shifted to show Elder Zixthara floating in what looked like a crystal cathedral. Behind her, other ancient beings moved like living jewels. Their ships were works of art that had sailed between stars since before Earth's sun was born. "Admiral Chun," the Elder's voice sang out with harmonics that made the air vibrate. "The Galactic Council demands an explanation. Your ships continue to operate in the war zone, despite explicit instructions to withdraw." Sarah stood straighter and faced the screen. "We are providing humanitarian aid to civilian populations. We are not involved in military operations. You are interfering with the natural course of galactic conflict. War has always been how the galaxy settles such disputes. Civilian casualties are regrettable, but necessary for the greater good. The greater good doesn't include letting billions of innocent people die." Elder Zixthara's crystal form shifted colors, showing irritation. "More concerning is how your primitive vessels continue to avoid destruction. Our sensors indicate that your ships should have been obliterated by reality warping attacks. Yet somehow you survive weapons that can fold space itself." Sarah smiled slightly. "We're hard to hit. That is not an explanation. The Mentarch Council requires full disclosure of your defensive technology. If you possess military capabilities beyond our understanding, this changes the entire strategic balance of the war." Captain Morrison moved closer to Sarah and spoke quietly. "Admiral, they're demanding our navigation and defense specifications." Sarah nodded and stepped closer to the communication screen. "Elder Zixthara, I'll be happy to explain our technology. But first, I need something from you." The crystal being's harmonic showed surprise. "You would bargain with the Mentarch Council? I'll share everything you want to know about our ships. But in exchange, the Galactic Council must agree to immediate evacuation protocols for all civilian populations in the war zone. No more delays, no more acceptable casualties." The communication channel went silent for several minutes. Sarah could imagine the hurried consultations happening on the Mentarch ships. Finally, Elder Zixthara returned. "Explain your technology first. Then we will consider your proposal." Sarah gathered her senior staff around the communication station. This was the moment she had been preparing for since the war began. Time to show the galaxy that the child species had some surprises. "Our defensive systems work on principles of chaos mathematics and adaptive response," Sarah began. "Most galactic species build their navigation around fixed stellar landmarks and predictable physics. You calculate the shortest path between 2 points and follow it." Elder Zixthara's ass harmonic showed confusion. "Of course. That is the logical approach to space travel. On Earth, we learn navigation from sailing the oceans and flying through storms. Water and weather are chaotic systems that change constantly. You can't predict them with fixed calculations. So we develop navigation systems that read patterns in chaos and adapt in real time." Sarah gestured to Captain Morrison, who brought up a display of human ship design. "Our vessels don't follow predetermined paths through space. They read the local conditions, gravitational fields, electromagnetic patterns, even quantum fluctuations, and adjust their course continuously. This is primitive." Elder Zixthara sang out. "Intuitive navigation is inefficient and unreliable." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But when you fire a reality-warping weapon at us, your targeting computers calculate where our ship should be based on logical navigation patterns. Since we're not where logic says we should be, you miss." The crystal being's colors shifted rapidly, showing intense thought. You navigate by chaos theory? You deliberately choose inefficient paths to avoid being predictable? We navigate by reading the storm, Morrison added. Every patch of space has its own weather. Gravitational currents, energy flows, particle streams. We follow those currents instead of fighting them. Sarah continued the explanation. Our defensive fields work the same way. Instead of rigid shields, we use adaptive barriers that flow around incoming energy. Like how Earth's magnetic field deflects solar radiation. Impossible. Another Mentarch voice joined the conversation. Adaptive systems require processing power that exceeds your technological base. Captain Parks stepped forward. That's because you're thinking about it wrong. We don't calculate the adaptations. We feel them. Feel them? Sarah smiled. Our ship AIs aren't just computers. They're learning systems based on pattern recognition. They respond to threats the same way a human pilot would, by instinct and experience, not calculation. The implications of this hit the Mentarch Council like a cold wave. Elder Jixthara's voice became very quiet. You have created artificial intelligences that think intuitively rather than logically? We've created AIs that think like humans, Sarah corrected. Messy, adaptive, unpredictable. They make mistakes, but they also make leaps of insight that pure logic can't achieve. The communication channel fell silent again. This time, Sarah could hear faint harmonics in the background, the sound of the entire Mentarch Council arguing in their musical language, when Elder Zixthara returned. Her voice carried notes that the translator marked as fear and wonder mixed together. Admiral Chun, your species has developed technology that operates on fundamentally different principles than the rest of galactic civilization. Different doesn't mean better or worse, Sarah replied. It just means different. But the implications... If your navigation and AI systems work by chaos theory and intuitive response, what other technologies have you developed that we cannot understand? Sarah looked around at her crew. These were doctors, engineers, and rescue workers, not soldiers or weapons designers. But they had built ships that could survive attacks from reality-warping weapons and navigate through space storms that would destroy conventional vessels. Elder, we're not hiding super weapons or secret technologies. We're just doing what humans do, adapting, improvising, and helping people in need. If that seems mysterious to you, maybe the problem isn't our technology. Maybe the problem is that you've forgotten what it means to be flexible. The Mentarch Elder's colors shifted to deep blue, a sign of profound thought among her people. Admiral, your proposal. Full evacuation protocols in exchange for technological sharing. That's right. We'll teach anyone who wants to learn how to build adaptive navigation and defensive systems. But only if the Galactic Council agrees to prioritize saving civilian lives over military strategy. After another long pause, Elder Zixthara spoke again. The Mentarch Council will present your proposal to the full Galactic Assembly. However, I must warn you, other species are already requesting human aid in secret. The war may be forcing changes that none of us anticipated. As the communication ended, Sarah looked around her bridge. Through the windows, she could see human medical ships moving between the giant warships of the feuding powers. Small vessels carrying refugees to safety while ancient empires destroyed each other with weapons older than human civilization. Captain Morrison, she said quietly, increase our operations. If the galaxy's powers want to understand human technology, let's show them what we can really do. Outside, the war continued to escalate. But scattered across the combat zone, human ships continued their simple mission, saving lives one person at a time using technology that nobody else understood. The alarms started screaming at 0347 hours Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Chun jerked awake in her small cabin aboard the Terra Nova as the emergency lights bathed everything in red. She pulled on her uniform and ran to the command center where her officers were already gathering around displays, showing something that made no sense. "Report," she called out as she took her position at the central console. "Captain." Morrison's face was pale as he looked up from the sensor readings. "Admiral, both sides just deployed planet killers in the Andromeda Spiral. Simultaneously, the crystalline hegemony fired a reality-cracked torpedo at the main Void Syndicate base. The Syndicate responded with a dark matter bomb." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "Casualties?" "Unknown." "But Admiral," Morrison's voice shook slightly. The weapons hit each other. The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the disputed system. Where there should have been planets and space stations, the sensors showed something that hurt to look at. Reality itself seemed to be broken, torn open like a wound in space-time. "What am I looking at?" Sarah asked quietly. Chief Science Officer Dr. Patel moved to the display, her hand shaking as she manipulated the controls. The two weapons created a cascading space-time fracture. Reality is tearing apart. And it's expanding. The display zoomed out to show the fracture's projected growth. A jagged crack in space itself, spreading outward like breaking glass. In its path lay 6 inhabited worlds with a combined population of 2.3 million beings from dozens of different species. "Time until it reaches the first world?" Sarah asked. 18 hours, Dr. Patel replied. "Maybe less." "The fracture is accelerating." Sarah studied the readouts. The fracture zone showed impossible readings. Gravity flowing backwards, time moving in loops, space folded inside out. No ship using conventional navigation could survive in that chaos. The ancient technologies that had dominated space travel for millions of years were useless against broken physics. What are the crystalline hegemony and Void Syndicate doing about this? Morrison called up communication intercepts. They're in full panic mode. Their scientists are trying to calculate a solution using traditional space-time manipulation, but their models keep failing. Elder Zixthara has called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. And the evacuation of the threatened worlds? There isn't one. Both sides say it's impossible to navigate through the fracture zone. They're writing off 2.3 million lives as an acceptable loss. Sarah stood quietly for a moment, studying the tactical display. The fracture was like a massive space storm, but worse than any storm Earth had ever produced. Conventional navigation would be suicide. But human ships didn't use conventional navigation. "Captain Morrison, how many medical and rescue vessels do we have in the area?" Morrison checked his records. 47 ships, all with adaptive navigation and defensive systems. "But Admiral, no one has ever tried to navigate through broken space-time. We don't know if our systems can handle that level of chaos." Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were people who had volunteered to help strangers in a war that wasn't their fight. They had already risked their lives dozens of times to save refugees from conventional battle zones. "Dr. Patel, could our adaptive navigation systems work in the fracture?" The science officer studied her readings carefully. "Theoretically, yes. Our chaos navigation principles might actually work better in broken space-time than normal space. But Admiral, this is completely untested. We could be flying into a death trap." Sarah made her decision. "Signal all human vessels in the area. Operation Lighthouse is now active. We're going in." "Admiral," Morrison protested. "The Galactic Council explicitly forbade us from interfering in military operations. This could be seen as an act of war. Then let them declare war on us for trying to save lives," Sarah replied. "Signal the fleet. We have 18 hours to evacuate 2.3 million beings through broken space-time. If we're going to do this, we need to start now." The human rescue fleet moved toward the fracture zone like a school of fish swimming toward a hurricane. Each ship was small compared to the massive warships of the galactic powers, but they moved with purpose and coordination that impressed even their enemies. Admiral Chun led the fleet in the Terra Nova, her adaptive navigation systems reading the chaotic patterns of broken spacetime like a sailor reading storm clouds. Behind her, medical frigates and evacuation transports followed in formation that shifted and flowed like a living thing. The first test came at the outer edge of the fracture zone. Space itself seemed to twist as they approached, and the normal laws of physics began to break down. Conventional sensors went crazy, showing readings that changed from moment to moment. Navigation status? Sarah called out. Chief Pilot Commander Jackson was locked into his control interface, his hands dancing over controls that most alien species couldn't even understand. Reading the currents, Admiral. It's like flying through a three-dimensional whirlpool, but I can feel the patterns. We can do this. The human ship slipped into the fracture zone as reality twisted around them. What should have been instant death became a dance with chaos itself. The adaptive navigation systems rode the flows of broken space-time like surfers riding waves. Approaching the first evacuation site, Morrison reported. Kedron colony, population 450,000. Through the warped space, they could see the planet below them. The surface was still intact, but massive storms of twisted space-time raged in the upper atmosphere. Any normal ship trying to land would be torn apart by the impossible physics. Sarah opened communications to the planet below. Kedron colony, this is Admiral Chun of the Terran Rescue Fleet. We are here to evacuate your population. Prepare for emergency transport. The reply came back filled with static and fear. Terran Fleet, this is Colony Administrator Vextar. Our sensors show the space around us is completely unstable. How are you even still alive up there? We're good at flying through storms, Sarah replied simply. Begin evacuation procedures. We'll have transports on the surface in 30 minutes. The evacuation of Kedron colony became legendary. Human ships descended through storms of broken reality, their adaptive systems reading patterns that shouldn't exist. They loaded refugees onto modular transport ships that could reconfigure themselves in real time to handle the chaotic conditions. As word of the rescue spread across galactic communication networks, something unprecedented happened. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years began working together to broadcast the evacuation live across the galaxy. Elder Zixthara of the Mentarch Council watched from her command ship as human vessels accomplished the impossible. How are they doing this? She sang out to her science advisors. The human ships navigate by reading chaos itself, her chief scientist replied, harmonic showing amazement. Where we see impossible conditions, they see patterns. They are riding the storm like it's an ocean current. On his dark bridge, Void Syndicate Supreme Commander Nov has monitored the same feeds. The infant species flies through broken spacetime as easily as normal space. How did we underestimate them so completely? The evacuation continued for 16 hours. Human ships moved between 6 different worlds, loading civilians onto transport modules while spacetime twisted around them. Each rescue required navigating through conditions that would have destroyed any other technology in the galaxy. Captain Morrison's Florence Nightingale made 17 trips through the fracture zone, carrying refugees from multiple species to safety. His crew worked without rest, guided by navigation systems that responded to broken reality like a living organism adapting to its environment. Last transport away from Vegan Prime, Morrison reported as his ship emerged from the fracture carrying the final load of refugees. All 2.3 million civilians evacuated successfully, but the rescue operation provided an unexpected benefit. As human ships moved through the fracture zone, Their adaptive sensors gathered data on the space-time break that no other technology could have collected. Information that both the crystalline hegemony and Void Syndicate needed desperately to stop the expanding catastrophe. Dr. Patel coordinated with scientists from both factions, sharing the navigation data that human ships had gathered while flying through impossible conditions. For the first time in the war, both sides worked together, using human-provided information to calculate how to close the fracture. "The stabilization equations are working," Dr. Patel announced as the combined alien fleets moved into position around the fracture. "The reality break is starting to contract." Sarah watched as massive alien warships used the data gathered by her small rescue fleet to fire precisely calculated energy bursts into the heart of the fracture. Slowly, the broken space-time began to heal itself, reality reasserting its normal laws. As the fracture finally sealed, Sarah opened a communication channel to the entire galactic fleet. "This is Admiral Chun to all vessels. The space-time fracture has been contained. All civilian populations have been evacuated successfully. 0 casualties." The communication channel fell silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, ships from both sides of the war began broadcasting acknowledgments. Not just military confirmations, but something that sounded almost like gratitude. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their floating seats, but no one spoke. The war was over, ended not by military victory, but by exhausted recognition of how close they had come to destroying themselves and everyone around them. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in the section that was no longer marked for new species. After the events in the Andromeda Spiral, Terra had been moved to the front of the council chamber, next to the ancient races who had ruled galactic politics for millions of years. Elder Zixthar arose from her crystal throne, her form shifting through colors that the translators marked as deep respect and something approaching shame. Her voice, when she spoke, carried harmonics that made the entire hall resonate like a bell. "The Council recognizes Admiral Sarah Chun of Terra, commander of the fleet that prevented galactic catastrophe." Sarah entered the hall wearing her simple blue uniform, still showing wear from weeks of rescue operations. Behind her walked Captain Morrison and Dr. Patel, along with other human officers who had risked their lives in broken space-time. They looked small and plain next to the towering crystal beings, shadow-wreathed aliens, and other exotic species that filled the chamber. But as they walked to the center of the hall, something unprecedented happened. One by one, the representatives stood. Not just the newer species or Terra's few allies, but the ancient powers themselves. The crystalline hegemony, the Void Syndicate, the Mentarch Council, all rising to honor the small group of humans. Elder Zixthar's voice filled the chamber. "Admiral Chun, the Galactic Council owes you and your species an apology. We dismiss Terra as too young and inexperienced to understand the complexities of galactic politics. We were wrong." Sarah stood calmly in the center of the Great Hall, surrounded by beings whose civilizations were older than her planet's geological history. "Elder, we didn't ask for apologies. We just wanted to help." "And that," the crystal being replied, "is exactly why we were wrong about you. Your species has demonstrated something that we lost long ago, the willingness to risk everything for strangers who could offer you nothing in return." "Elder." Zixthar gestured to the great displays around the chamber. They showed statistics from the war that made everyone present uncomfortable. Billions of credits spent on weapons. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable by exotic weapons. Industrial capacity that could have fed galaxies, instead devoted to building instruments of destruction. The war between the crystalline hegemony and Void Syndicate cost more than any. Conflict in galactic history. We destroyed 3 star systems fighting over mining rights that are now inaccessible due to space-time damage. We nearly created a reality fracture that could have consumed entire sectors. The displays shifted to show the human rescue operations. Simple ships with adaptive technology, saving lives while the great powers fought. Medical frigates, treating refugees from species they had never encountered. Evacuation transports, flying through broken space-time to reach people that everyone else had written off. Meanwhile, Terra's response was to save 4.7 million civilian lives using technology that operates on principles none of us fully understand. Your ships accomplished what our most advanced sciences deemed impossible, using methods that seem simple but work where our complex systems fail. Sarah looked around the chamber at faces that showed confusion, respect, and something that might have been hope. Elder, we didn't do anything mysterious. We just adapted to the situation and helped people who needed help. Admiral, called out Supreme Commander Nulvus of the Void Syndicate, his shadow form taking on patterns that indicated deep thought. Your navigation technology, your adaptive defense systems, your artificial intelligences that think intuitively rather than logically. These represent fundamental advances in galactic science. They represent different ways of thinking about problems, Sarah corrected. Not necessarily better ways, just different ones. Elder Zixthara Solars shifted to show what the translators marked as profound realization. Admiral, that difference in thinking may be exactly what galactic civilization needs. We have become fixed in our approaches, trapped by millions of years of tradition and established methods. Your species brings fresh perspectives to ancient problems. The Elder paused, her crystal form singing out harmonics of decision. The Galactic Council votes to grant Terra full membership, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. But more than that, we formally request that Terra establish and lead the Galactic Emergency Response Corps. Sarah felt Elena stiffen beside her. This was far beyond what they had expected. What would this corps involve? A fleet dedicated to humanitarian aid and disaster response, Elder Zixthara explained. Operating independently of military command structures, responding to emergencies regardless of political considerations. With Admiral Chun as its first director. Sarah looked at Captain Morrison and Dr. Patel. These were people who had volunteered to help strangers in a war that wasn't their responsibility. They had risked their lives repeatedly to save people they had never met. The idea of expanding that mission to serve the entire galaxy was both exciting and overwhelming. We accept, Sarah said simply. With conditions. The chamber buzzed with surprised harmonics, clicks, and whispers. Elder Zixthara's colors showed curiosity. What conditions? First, the GERC operates completely independently. We respond to humanitarian crises based on need, not politics. Second, any species can join the corps, regardless of their political affiliations. Third, we share our adaptive technology freely with anyone willing to use it for humanitarian purposes. Sarah paused, looking around the great chamber. And fourth, the GERC's primary mission is always to preserve life. We don't take sides in wars. We just help people who need help. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every species in the council voted for the same proposal. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Elder Zixthara approached Sarah privately. Her crystal form had shifted to colors of respect, mixed with something that might have been friendship. Admiral, may I ask you something that has puzzled the Mentarch Council? Of course. Why did your species risk so much for people you didn't know? You could have stayed safe in your home system, as we instructed. Why did you involve yourself in our war? Sarah thought for a moment. Elder, when my people first went into space, we brought something with us from Earth. A simple idea. that everyone deserves help when they need it, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Even your enemies? We don't really have enemies, Sarah replied. We have people we disagree with, people we don't understand, and people who make different choices than we would. But when those people need help, they're just people who need help. Elder Zixthara's harmonics showed deep thought. Your species has a saying, I believe. Something about the content of one's character. Sarah smiled. Judge people by who they are, not what they look like or where they come from. Yes, we try to live by that. Perhaps, the crystal being said slowly, that is why your technology works where ours fails. Your ships adapt because your entire species is built on adaptation and acceptance of differences. 6 months later, the GERC fleet had grown to include volunteers from 47 different species. Human adaptive technology was being combined with alien engineering to create rescue ships more capable than anything the galaxy had seen before. The simple modular designs that had once been dismissed as primitive were now being copied by the most advanced civilizations. Admiral Chun commanded the corps from a mobile headquarters that moved throughout the galaxy, responding to disasters natural and artificial. When a star went nova in the outer rim, GERC ships evacuated 12 worlds in 3 days. When a plague outbreak threatened the trade routes, human medical technology combined with alien resources to develop treatments in record time. But perhaps the most important change was subtle. Wars still happened, but they happened differently. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together on GERC missions. Technologies that had been military secrets were shared freely for humanitarian purposes. And gradually, the galaxy began to remember something it had lost in millions of years of ancient conflicts. Elena Vasquez, now Terra's permanent representative to the Galactic Council, watched from the observation deck as another GERC fleet departed for a rescue mission. Human ships flew alongside crystal vessels, shadow cruisers, and exotic craft from species she was still learning to pronounce. Elder Zixthara joined her at the observation window. Ambassador, do you regret that your species became involved in our war? Elena smiled as she watched the mixed fleet disappear into hyperspace. Elder, we were never involved in your war. We were involved in ending it. How do you mean? You told us to leave Terra out of the war, Elena replied. So instead, Terra left war out of the galaxy's future. The crystal being's harmonics showed what the translator marked as joy. An interesting perspective. Your species continues to surprise us. As the stars wheeled overhead, ships from across the galaxy continued their patrols. Small rescue vessels carrying the simple mission that had started it all, helping people who needed help. Regardless of politics, species, or ancient grudges, the galaxy was slowly learning what humanity had known all along.